TNA's turning point was this past Friday. We may have a new knockout as the number one contender to the Knockouts World Championship. Did Steve Macklin conquer Josh Alexander? And who walked out of Turning Point the TNA World Champion? This is the TNA Impact Review, and I am your host, Ringsider Anthony. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Wrasslin for Life Network, and welcome back to another edition of the TNA Impact Review. Today, we will talk about Turning Point. Turning Point went down Friday, November 29th from Russellcade in North Carolina, and we kicked off Turning Point with a three-way knockouts match. It was Rosemary versus Zaya Brookside versus Savannah Evans, and this was a great match, which I thought was going to be won by Savannah Evans as they try to build her as a dominant knockout in the knockouts division, but it was won by Rosemary, which I'm not upset about. She's the veteran in TNA, and she needs all the victories that she can get, and it seems like that Rosemary may be the number one contender for Masha's title, as later on in the night there was a video package, and basically Rosemary said, no matter who walks out of knockout as the knockouts champion tonight, I will snatch your soul. She's out there snatching souls. She's ready to gain her throne and become TNA Knockouts World Champion. So it seems like in the future we may get a Rosemary title match. She may be in some type of title match depending on who actually walked out of Turning Point as the Knockouts World Champion, and we will talk about that very soon. So we kicked off the main card of Turning Point with Mike Santana versus Frankie Kazarian, and every week on these TNA reviews, I just praise Mike Santana and how far he has come in this TNA run right now. He is doing excellent things. This match was great. Frankie Kazarian as a heel is very annoying. So I was looking forward to Mike Santana really taking him out, but also I had Frankie Kazarian winning because he just won the Call Your Shot Gauntlet match and he's trying to pursue the World Championship. So I was like, maybe Frankie Kazarian can't afford a loss here, and let me take Frankie Kazarian for the win. He could cheat to win and it still make Mike Santana look strong and clean in TNA right now, but they gave the victory to Mike Santana, which I'm not upset about. I'm not mad about it at all because Mike Santana is on the climb to the main event scene. He says he wants the World Championship, and I believe he will get that World Championship in 2025, closer to the middle or the end of 2025, because we still have to get Joe Hendry as world champion. Fans are clamoring for Joe Hendry to be TNA world champion, and I know that it's going to happen. It could happen at Genesis. Genesis means beginnings, new beginnings, so maybe at Genesis Nick Nemeth drops the title to Joe Hendry. I'm not sure because we still have to keep in mind that Frankie Kazarian he can call his shot at any time. But Mike Santana did pick up the victory in this match. A huge victory for Mike Santana, and this was a phenomenal match. This is how you kick off a pay-per-view or a TNA monthly special. Put Mike Santana as the opening match. He's going to get the crowd hyped. He's going to get the crowd into it, and that's exactly what happened. Kudos to Mike Santana for beating Frankie Kazarian. Briefly, I'm going to talk about the Turkey Bowl match, which was won by Joe Hendry. The person that was pinned was Brian Myers, which I called. I called it in our preview and prediction show here on the channel that Brian Myers will be taking the loss here and wearing the turkey suit. That is what happened, but I want everybody to remember, I know people are upset that Joe Hendry is not in the main event scene. A couple of weeks ago, I want to say roughly a month ago, Santino Marella said that Joe Hendry had to start from the bottom and climb his way back to the top because he lost that Bound for Glory. The bottom is the Turkey Bowl match. Joe Hendry will be back in that World Championship picture very, very soon and winning that title. But Joe Hendry did win this match, and Brian Myers did have to wear the turkey suit. It's been roughly a month that Moose has been X Division champion, and I still can't believe that Moose is X Division champion. At Turning Point, Moose faced Laredo Kid in what I thought was a really great match. It was a solid match by both ends. I always say this, but Moose is a top tier talent in TNA. That is why he is the longest contract holder in TNA wrestling. And then you have Laredo Kid, who pops in and out of TNA and always delivers stellar matches. Now, I do believe this match should have been Moose versus Leon Slater, but I knew Laredo Kid and Moose would put on a great match, which they did, and it was won by Moose. Kudos to both gentlemen for putting on a fantastic match at Turning Point. Turning Point wasn't the best TNA pay-per-view, but it wasn't the worst. It wasn't bad by all accounts. I feel like it was very, very solid. I wish they were in a better venue, but they partnered with WrestleCade, so they, were given what they had got. So it's not a bad thing, but this match was great. If you haven't seen it, please go back out and watch it. It's Moose versus Laredo Kid for the X Division title. Dare I say Josh Alexander versus Steve Macklin was match of the night? Yeah, I'm saying it. That was match of the night. I really enjoyed Josh Alexander versus Steve Macklin. Josh Alexander had 2 victories up on Steve Macklin. I think there was one victory at Victory Road in 2023. And then at Bound for Glory, Josh Alexander pulled out the victory again. And then they started these vignettes with Steve Macklin really kind of digging deep into where his head was right now in TNA wrestling. And I think that those vignettes pulled out the best in Steve Macklin, and Steve Macklin picked up the victory in this huge no disqualification match at Turning Point. So proud of Steve Macklin. He needed this win. If Macklin didn't win this, I don't know what would be next for Steve Macklin. Josh Alexander, it seems like he is stepping towards free agency next year. He wants to explore his options before potentially re-signing with TNA. So you gotta give the next crop of talent some insight here. You gotta give them the momentum. And I think last night it was a little bit of a momentum shift. Josh Alexander kind of passing the torch on to Steve Macklin to carry that TNA torch for a little bit. So great showing by both men. Steve Macklin again needed this victory. If he didn't win, somehow I was going to start a riot, but Steve Macklin picks up the victory here. Congratulations to Steve Macklin. So we had a huge 6-man tag team match at Turning Point. Trey Miguel was unable to compete. Trey Miguel had travel issues, so they had to find a replacement for their team. But it was the Hardys and Ace Austin versus, it was supposed to be Trey Miguel, Zachary Wentz, and Kushida, but it was actually Matt Riddle who replaced Trey Miguel. And I know a lot of people have their mixed feelings about Matt Riddle. All I'm going to say here is I think Matt Riddle is a phenomenal wrestler, and he was already there in North Carolina for WrestleCade. So being able to pull Matt Riddle in, and he has history with Wentz, I think was a good choice, history-wise in wrestling with Matt Riddle and Wentz. But the Hardys picked up the win here. The Hardys and Ace Austin picked up the victory here. I predicted that. The Hardys just signed their 1-year contract. They are the TNA World Tag Team Champions right now. So I think they kind of needed this win, right? I think they are building the tag team division around the Hardys because we've lost Chris Bay due to an injury. And so we need that stable tag team right now in the tag team division in TNA. And the Hardys are it. You can always count on the Hardys, I feel like. So this was a great match. If you haven't watched this 6-man tag team match, I feel like you should. It was really solid for what it was and how it was kind of thrown together real quick. This entire pay-per-view in a way was kind of thrown together, but it's not a bad thing because they did deliver in this pay-per-view. But go check out the Hardys and Ace Austin versus Matt Riddle, Zachary Wentz, and Kushida. So Jordan Grace got her rematch. It was Masha Slamovich versus Jordan Grace for the TNA Knockouts World Championship. If you don't know, Jordan Grace lost the title at Bound for Glory. I believe everyone should know that now, but we're here for a history lesson, right? So, yes, at Bound for Glory, Jordan Grace lost the title to Masha Slamovich. Jordan Grace wanted her rematch. She got her rematch at Turning Point in a 2 out of 3 falls match. This was a great match. I think I would call this maybe the second match of the night here. These two women delivered every time they're in that ring. They deliver. They've raised the stakes, calling this a 2 out of 3 falls match, where Jordynne Grace got the first fall. Masha then picked up the last 2 falls to retain the TNA Knockouts World Championship. Phenomenal match, but who is on the horizon next to challenge Masha Slamovich? That is Rosemary, because Rosemary was actually at the entrance ramp throughout a good portion of this match, watching it. And yeah, Rosemary is definitely the next challenger. I don't know if it's going to be at Final Resolution. I don't know if they're going to save this for Genesis in January, but Rosemary versus Masha Slamovich, that match will bang. I don't know what's next for Jordynne Grace. I know the speculation is Jordynne Grace is all but going to WWE. I did watch TNA Immersed. And if you don't know what TNA TNA Immersed is like WWE 24, where they go over 2 wrestlers in their big match. And the 2 wrestlers that they went over were Masha Slamovich and Jordynne Grace, headed towards Bound for Glory. And at the end of that Immersed special that TNA had, Jordynne Grace basically said she doesn't know what's next for her. She says, a lot of people, the fans, think they know what's next for me, but I personally don't know what's next for me. So Jordynne Grace could head to WWE. Jordynne Grace could potentially head to AEW. Jordynne Grace could re-sign with TNA. No one knows at this moment, and until we hear her theme song in WWE, TNA, whatever it may be, right now, Jordynne Grace is still under contract with TNA Wrestling until the end of January. So we shall see what's next for Jordynne Grace. I'm excited. I'm going to do my best to follow Jordynne Grace wherever she goes, because she is top tier talent. Jordynne Grace is one of the best wrestlers, not the best women's wrestler, one of the best wrestlers in the world today. And she has proved it on many stages, just not in TNA, just not in WWE, but traveling all around the world as TNA Knockouts World Champion, defending that title with all her strength, with all her heart. Her heart and soul is TNA Wrestling. She has said she would be nothing without TNA Wrestling. That is where she made a name for herself. That is where she built her career. TNA and Jordynne Grace have an excellent relationship. And if TNA decides to re-sign Jordynne Grace, if Jordynne Grace decides to re-sign with TNA, I will be extremely happy. But if Jordynne Grace wants to step out on her own and find out what she can do somewhere else, I am here for it. I am going to follow Jordynne Grace wherever she goes, like I said before. But this was a great match. This was a great 2 out of 3 falls match with Masha and Jordynne, and I believe you should go check out this match on the TNA Plus app. Lastly, we have the world title match in the main event of Turning Point. Nick Nemeth was defending against Eddie Edwards. And honestly, y'all, I don't know how we got to this match. I do know Nick Nemeth is feuding with all of the members of the system. He has feuded with all of the members of the system at one point. And I think this was just another match to have at Turning Point with Eddie Edwards. But this was a solid match. I actually really enjoyed that. Eddie Edwards, I know a lot of people have things to say about Eddie Edwards, like he doesn't show charisma or anything like that, but I do know this: Eddie Edwards gets in that ring and delivers all the time. And I think this might have been his 3rd Turning Point in a row where he has main evented. Last year, he main evented against Will Ospreay, and that was a phenomenal match. And this match with Nick Nemeth was great as well. But the big question is, why does JBL continue to come out and interfere in Nick Nemeth's matches? I need an explanation. Like, I need an explanation now. Nick Nemeth did retain, but JBL did come out and attack the members of the system that were trying to help Eddie Edwards gain the TNA World Championship. But Nick Nemeth took the victory here. He is still world champion. I still need an explanation from TNA and JBL of why he continues to interfere. But this was a great match to end Turning Point and send the fans home happy. Turning Point was a solid pay-per-view. It wasn't the best, it wasn't the worst, but it wasn't bad. It was really, really solid and consistent. And that's what you can ask for from a wrestling show, a consistent wrestling show. And that's what Turning Point was. If I had to give Turning Point a rating, I would potentially give it a 7.5. It didn't quite hit 8, but it didn't quite hit below 7. It was kind of right in the middle. If there was any matches I would go back and watch from Turning Point, it would be Mike Santana versus Frankie Kazarian. It would be Jordan Grace versus Masha Slamovich. And I think I would potentially go back and watch Steve Macklin versus Josh Alexander, because that was a banger match. So all three of those matches I would go back and watch from Turning Point. Like I said, all the matches weren't great, but there were a portion of the matches that really got you sucked into what was happening in the middle of that ring. So Turning Point at the end of the day gets a 7.5 out of 10 for me for that TNA special. All right, guys, that is the end of the TNA Impact review this week. We covered all things Turning Point. Turning Point, again, was a solid show. I really enjoyed it. If you haven't seen Turning Point, I listed 3 matches that I think you should go back out and see. I think you will enjoy that. But if you are watching on YouTube, thank you. If you are listening to the Wrasslin for Life Network on any of the podcasting platforms, I thank you as well. I am your host, Ringsider Anthony, and I will see you in the next one.